Hello and welcome back to Catholicism Explained on Truth and Love channel. I am Ryan Patrick,
I am Ryan Joseph.
and we are talking about papal resignations and elections. So as we mentioned, Pope Benedict XVI recently announced that he would be resigning from the papacy effective February 28th at 8 p.m. And that means that we have an election coming up, a papal election, known as a conclave, which, by the way, Ryan Joseph, where does that term come from?
I don't know.
You don't know? Okay.
I don't know where it comes from.
Thank you for your honesty.
Yeah.
That is a Catholic virtue right there. Um, Conclave actually comes from two Latin words, cum clave, which means with a key, because the idea is that, and this is more or less literal um, in meaning, the cardinals are actually locked up with a key in the Sistine Chapel and in certain very limited portions of the Vatican complex, if you will,
Mhm.
in order to keep them from as much outside pressure as possible. So we don't want any outside, political or social pressure coming to bear on the cardinals.
So we won't be hearing
Um,
any tweets from Cardinal Dolan.
Not at
All
all, not at
right.
all. They must turn in all their, if they have cell phones or any access to computers, the internet, social media. That's all gone. They are blacked out until they elect a new pope. And I really think in addition to being part of the mystique of papal elections, I really think that's a good thing for the church, for the cardinals to be as free as possible. It's really about freedom for the cardinals.
Yeah, no social pressures to
Right,
nudge
right.
them one way or another.
Because of course, as we mentioned before, the sole consideration, the sole, well, put it this way: the cardinals are only taking one opinion poll, and that is of the Holy Spirit,
Yeah.
right? That's the only person whose opinion they're interested in, as far as who should be the next Bishop of Rome and pastor of the Universal Church.
Right. And so as we ended our last video on it, you know, how many votes does it take to actually elect a pope? So
Right.
there are several answers out there, and the answer is this,
Hmm.
essentially. For the first 30 goes at it, two-thirds majority is what's needed.
The 30 or 34?
30.
30. Okay.
30.
So for the first 30 ballots.
First 30 ballots, it
Okay.
is a two-thirds vote that needs for one person to become pope. Now, after that, it becomes a simple majority. So 50% plus one is what they're looking for. And it's very interesting how that dynamic happens because it has happened before where it's gone to that
Right.
period.
Not recently.
No, like
Not
Cardinal Pope Benedict, I mean,
right.
his was pretty straightforward.
Right. He was
And
elected on the fourth ballot.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. So now, what happens, Ryan, if a ballot fails? If a candidate, for lack of a better term, does not receive two-thirds majority vote?
they they go to the chimney and or the fireplace and
Okay.
they take I forget which coal um, it is or what they burn, but they do you know what it is?
I believe in the past, and where we're going with this, folks, is the white smoke, black smoke thing. So
Right.
so
Black
so
smoke is no, white smoke is
right,
yes.
right, right. So in other words, after every ballot, all of the ballots and notes that the cardinals may have made are burned in the stove of the Sistine Chapel. The smoke from that, from those burning ballots, can be seen coming out of a small stovepipe, in St. Peter's Square. And so the crowds will typically during the course of a papal election, the crowds will be gathered outside of the Sistine Chapel in St. Peter's Square, and all eyes are fixed on that stovepipe. And what they're looking for is white smoke or black smoke. If cardinals are successful in electing a new pope, the smoke will be white. And if they are unsuccessful, the smoke will be black. Now, I believe in the past they have thrown in a little bit of wet straw
Okay.
with the
Yeah, that'll
failed
make it black.
ballots
Yeah.
in order to make it black. Now, because you know this can be a very ambiguous affair trying to discern white smoke or black smoke. I hear they have new and more modern methods of producing black smoke or white smoke. I think they actually have a special chemical that they throw in with the successful ballots
Hmm.
to make the smoke white. All right. But in any case, upon a successful ballot, one of the cardinals or whomever the cardinals choose receiving 2/3 majority, we then have a pope almost, because then the cardinal dean, so the leader of the College of Cardinals, will approach the cardinal elected pope, and he will ask him two things. He will ask, first of all, do you accept? And hopefully the cardinal who has been elected says, yes, I do accept. And then the cardinal dean will ask, by what name do you wish to be known? And that is a reference to um, the new pope's regnal name, the name that he will be known by during his reign as pope. And that's a tradition that goes back almost to the beginning, not entirely to the beginning, but almost to the beginning, where popes change their name, usually out of reverence for a particular saint and or one or more of their papal predecessors. So, in other words, um, John Paul II chose his name in honor of John Paul I, who came immediately before him and who only reigned for about a month, Paul VI, who came before him,
Hmm.
and John the 23rd, who came before him. So this was a nod to all three of his immediate predecessors. Pope Benedict the 16th, chose his regnal name Benedict for two reasons. As a nod to Pope Benedict the 15th, who reigned during World War I. He was known as a peacemaker. He worked very hard to achieve peace between the various warring nations during World War I. And also as a nod to Saint Benedict, who's the father of Western monasticism. Um, Pope Benedict is a great fan, as it were, of Benedictine spirituality and frequently makes retreats in Benedictine monasteries. Um, so that went into it as well. So what happens after a pope is elected by his peers, by the College of Cardinals, and has accepted his papal resign or his election as pope and taken a regnal name? What's the next step there, Ryan Joseph?
Well, doesn't he get the white garments?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
aren't they like custom fit to him and everything,
Well, yeah, but
or
here's
or are you talking about like
yeah.
the additional oath that he has to take, or doesn't he take an?
He doesn't take an oath.
He
He
doesn't
doesn't
take
take
an
an
oath.
oath.
Okay, I was
Um,
confused on that.
right.
So,
Yeah, yeah. You're right. You're right. He will don his papal robes, which are traditionally white and red.
mhm.
He'll be taken to a small sacristy off the um, uh, the Sistine Chapel. It's just to the left of the high altar, and that room is known as the. Do you know this one?
I'm
The
not.
Room of Tears. So
Why is it
this
called tears?
Well, I
Just
mean,
a
I
quick
guess I
brief.
guess the presumption is that a great deal of emotional weeping goes on um, in this um, in this room. The Pope has just been elected moments before. He's accepted his election, and now he's faced with the tremendous task of shepherding 1.2 billion of the world's Catholics. Needless to say, that's a huge responsibility and can be quite overwhelming for a pope. So this room is called the Room of Tears, and there is a very old and prestigious tailoring firm in Rome whose name escapes me right now. Um, but they produce three sets of papal robes, large, medium, and small, depending upon who's elected, and then the new pope will just choose which set fits best. So thereafter the pope will come out, and he will receive the homage, to use a somewhat outdated word, of his peers, of the College of Cardinals, and they will each in their turn come before the pope and very very solemnly profess their obedience to him as the supreme pontiff.
Right, and just to clarify, because a lot of people seem to think that even though they do that, that the Pope is somehow the like not a stand-in for Jesus, but something else, something more sinister, and that's not the point of this. I just want to clarify this because a lot of
Yeah,
people kind of go on edge at that point what Ryan just
yeah,
mentioned about the obedience
yeah.
because it's a hierarchy. Um, yes, it goes up to the Pope, and then the Pope is being led by the Holy Spirit. It is never assumed that we do not believe that the Pope is given authority on his own regard, on his own merits. It is through God that the Pope has that office,
Right,
nothing
right,
else.
right, right.
So,
At the same time, the Pope is a great gift to us as a church. I mean,
right.
um, this is a man who is given to us by God as a father, as a father of fathers. Hence, we call him the Holy Father. Our very English word Pope comes from the Greek word papas, meaning father. And so when I say homage, the homage that we pay, the respect, the reverence,
Mm-hmm.
the devotion that we pay to the Holy Father is that respect and devotion that a child would pay to a father, to a revered father. Um, and that's very much that kind of reverence and obedience that the cardinals pay to the Pope in that moment, acknowledging him as father.
Right. And so, what do you think? I guess what would you say in your speculation
Right,
on who would be the next pope? I mean, who do you
right,
think would be the next pope, or
right,
do you think who has the qualifications for it? Of
right,
course, we believe the Holy Spirit's guiding the cardinals, but just
right,
from what you
right,
know, I know
right.
you dig into this a lot more than in terms of the cardinals, into it a lot more than I do because
Yeah,
I know only a few offhand. Um, but what do you think?
yeah. Well, and you're absolutely right to say that we have to preface this with the fact that the cardinals will elect, with the assistance of the Holy Spirit, the man whom they believe to be best suited for the job, not whom I believe to be, or you or anybody else or anybody in the news media for that matter, believe to be the best person for the job, but the man whom they truly believe to have the qualifications for the papacy and the kind of pope that we need in these times, at this particular juncture in the history of the church. That being said, it's just fun to speculate about these things, especially this time around, where we have, I think, two very strong contenders, although even there, there's a word that we borrow from modern American politics, isn't it?
Yeah.
Contenders, um, candidates, perhaps, two very strong candidates uh, from the United States of America. I'm thinking primarily of Cardinal Timothy Dolan, who's the Archbishop of New York, and Cardinal Sean O'Malley, who is the Archbishop of Boston. Um, Dolan, I think, Dolan has several things going for him. The first and most immediate thing that anybody recognizes about Dolan is that he is such a kind, warm-hearted, jovial, I mean, just joy-filled man. He's the baby kissing, back slapping, pass me a beer kind of good old guy, and people love it, and people eat it up, and maybe more than all of that, they see that he's sincere. That here is a sincerely, good-hearted person who's really interested in people's welfare, right? So there's Dolan. He also has the tremendous assets of being a remarkably good teacher of the faith, um, who also has a Roman connection. He was the rector or president of the Pontifical North American College in Rome for a number of years. So that's the primary North American seminary in Rome. So he knows Rome quite well, and he is known in Roman circles, which I think is a huge advantage for anyone whom the cardinals might be considering um, for the papacy.
Now, like what I've heard from from reading about Cardinal O'Malley
Hmm.
is just to switch to my O'Malley for a second, um, is how well he handled the sexual scandals, and that needs to be addressed because that is something that is still being bombarded down. I mean, even my throat. Like I'm hearing it just being a Catholic. I hear horrendous remarks
Right.
from what a very few number of people did being reflected on me. But the way he handled it was very, I mean, humbling and very respectful to the families that were affected and victimized by such tragedies.
Absolutely, absolutely. I'm thinking particularly of his selling of the large and rather glamorous um, archbishop's residence in Boston, and moving into comparatively simple quarters in the local seminary, um, using that money as settlements for those who have been abused by priests and others in the church. Um, O'Malley is a Franciscan friar, which means that he's a very simple, very humble soul. He lives a very simple, humble lifestyle. Um, he typically shies away from the scarlet robes which he is entitled to wear as a cardinal, and tends more towards his simple, coarse, brown Franciscan habit. That's invariably what you would see him in on a daily basis. Um, perhaps even were he elected pope. I mean, who knows? But he just has that simple, humble, gentle, kind spirit, and that genuine um, thirst for justice that would be a huge asset in restoring somewhat of the credibility of the church in the wake um, of the sex abuse scandals.
Right, and I think you've mentioned something that's very interesting because both Dolan, all right, so both American, but from two separate backgrounds in terms of how they manage or how they at least have their public life. Because Cardinal Dolan, for example, was at both the Republican and the Democratic National Convention and did the final prayer,
Oh, sure, yeah,
and that's very public.
right.
Whereas you're talking about O'Malley, which I know a lot of people. I mean, I didn't know about him until I started looking up. Who do I think might become pope?
Hmm.
Whatnot, and he put his name. His name's being put in there, and I mean, like you said, he's very genuine and
Hmm.
respectful, and at the same time humble, and
Hmm.
that would be a great way
For
to
sure,
transition from Benedict
for
to
sure.
a
Yeah,
pope that is very humble. Um,
yeah,
they're all humble, but I'm
yeah,
saying like
yeah,
in his unique way.
yeah. He looks the part too, I have to say,
Yeah.
with that snowy white beard and glasses and kind of warm Irish smile. He looks somewhat like like Santa Claus in a brown robe. Um, so that would be something anyway. Now, a third possibility really leaps out at me, and he certainly garnered a lot of attention here in the American press, and that is Cardinal Peter Turkson of Ghana,
Mhm.
who currently serves as the head of the Pontifical Council for Justice and Peace. And if that sounds like a lot of church talk to people, that's just to say that the Vatican, like any other government, is divided into all sorts of different divisions or cabinets, you might say, departments. Among them are what we call pontifical councils. So these are groups of people. They might be cardinals, they might be archbishops and bishops and priests, or even lay people who are um, assigned a specific task by the Holy Father. In this case, it's with pursuing issues of justice and peace in the name of the Church, and so that's Cardinal Turkson's position. As a cardinal from Ghana, he's African. He wouldn't be the first African pope in history, but he would be the first African pope in a very long time.
Right.
Um,
Previous to, just to preface that, like,
yeah,
previous to Pope John Paul II, there were 500 years of straight Italians,
yeah,
of nothing but Italians. So it would be quite the change. We went Polish, German, and it could be someone from the New World,
hmm
Central or North and South America, or it could be someone from Africa. I mean, it,
right,
it could even be someone from Asia.
sure,
But
sure,
those are the names that are kind of popping out right now.
yeah.
I mean, there's even one from Canada.
Oh yes, yes, yes.
I keep forgetting his name because I want to say Olet, and I know
Yeah,
that's not it. It's
yeah.
you know what it is?
Close, Ouellet. Cardinal Marc Ouellet, who is the former, if I'm not mistaken, he's the former Archbishop of Quebec, uh, Quebec, as the Quebecois would say. The former Archbishop of Quebec in Canada. Yes, his name has been tossed around quite a bit as well. Um, yeah, so we have Dolan, O'Malley, Turkson, and Ouellet have been probably the most popular names, at least in the American media, and also I think in the Italian
Mm-hmm.
media as well, especially those couple of Americans, Dolan and O'Malley. The recent buzz out of Italy has been well, the recent buzz has been that Italy is buzzing
Yeah.
about these names, in La Repubblica and various other um, you know um, Italian publications. So yeah, even to the point of there being suggestions that Cardinal Tarcisio Bertone, who is the Vatican Secretary of State, has been pulling strings behind the scenes to kind of kind of put the bug in his brother Cardinal's ears that you know this O'Malley guy is good. You
Yeah.
know, whether or not that's true, I mean, that could be total speculation on the part of the Italian press, but it's interesting to think about. Um, so, okay, so our new pope is elected. He has dressed the part. He has received the homage of his peers. Um, we've sent up the white smoke. We've rung the bells. And now the pope comes out onto the balcony of St. Peter's Basilica. And what's he do?
he
What's he doing up there?
he waves.
He waves. Does he do anything but wave?
He makes a speech. I mean,
Okay.
but it's like you said, like it's one of those speeches that like after the was it Chamber of Tears?
Yeah.
Um, it he was literally just made Pope, so
Sure.
he's that
It's very
speech could remain.
impromptu.
Yeah, that speech could be very different depending on who it is, and
Right.
if it was
Right.
someone like Dolan as
Yeah.
compared to O'Malley, I would expect Dolan to have kind of a lengthy speech and O'Malley to have kind of a short,
Right.
humbling speech. So,
I mean,
um,
Benedict XVI had a relatively short speech, and frequently um, these speeches will um, give some hint of the direction of the new pope's papacy. So, for instance, um, in Pope Benedict XVI's speech, he referred to himself as a simple laborer in the vineyard of the Lord, um, which almost echoes his papal model, uh, cooperatores in veritatem, cooperators in the truth. He saw that as very much being the call of all the faithful, and certainly of all ordained ministers in the church. The first and foremost of which is the Holy Father, to be a cooperator in the truth. That truth can be known and apprehended and to a certain degree understood by the human mind, via both reason and faith. And that's been a huge theme of Pope Benedict's reign. So I wouldn't be at all surprised if the next pope doesn't inaugurate his reign in very similar fashion.
Right. It's almost like the State of the Union address for the Pope.
Sort of,
Compared to,
although of
because
course,
it gives a
yeah,
direction, but
yeah,
it's
yeah.
you know,
Of course,
it's kind of impromptu.
not to
Right?
go off on too much of a tangent, but the Pope does actually have sort of his own State of the Union address. They call it the State of the World address,
Yeah.
which is kind of cool. But that's a whole nother episode, I think.
Right.
Um,
Because we need to get going because it's
we
going on
do,
25
we
minutes.
do. But I'll say one more thing. One more thing that the Pope does do before retiring for the afternoon is to give his blessing, urbi et orbi, which is a Latin phrase meaning to the city and the world. And he does this several times a year. I think most notably at Christmas and Easter. You know, the Pope will come out onto the balcony of St. Peter's Basilica and give this special papal blessing to the city and the world. Um, but here he gives his Urbi et Orbi blessing for the first time as Pope, and we are both very much looking forward to that moment when we receive the blessing of our next Pope and Holy Father.
Right. So we appreciate you guys listening, and I know this one was a bit longer than usual, a bit longer than usual. Sorry. Um, and again, we hope to hear from you. So please leave comments, questions, or funny stories in anywhere from the YouTube page or our email at truthinlovechannel@gmail. Um, again, we appreciate it, and God bless you.
Yeah, thanks very much. God bless.